All right, so my name is Dr. Maria Portelos-Romito. I am the Family Consumer Sciences Agent over at the University of Florida IFAS Extension. I teach a whole series of age-friendly classes. This class, which deals mostly with osteoporosis, but also building strong bones, as well as healthy eating and hydration, and swallowing problems and texture modification, fall prevention, health modifications in home design. I co-teach that with Lee Hayes Byron, who's also part of our office. I teach a lot of disaster preparedness with a focus on food safety, closing up your Florida home. And with food preservation, I teach water bath canning classes in person, as well as water bath and pressure canning, as well as food dehydration, and just a whole array of other classes. But those of you, I recognize some familiar names. Thank you for joining me today in this presentation. Again, this presentation is being recorded as well. So let's get started with bone health and the risk of osteoporosis. And let me start with my screen share. Again, excuse me if I pause to allow people in. Again, this is age-friendly. Bone health and the risk of osteoporosis. The University of Florida is an equal opportunity institution. And here are some of the things that we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about the osteoporosis and how it is a silent thief and the costs it has not only out of our pocket, but on our society and our health and our caregivers. Who's at risk? What is osteoporosis? Osteoporosis versus osteopenia. Factors that can cause low bone mass, bone health, and what we could do to prevent or treat osteoporosis. And then we're going to talk briefly about diet versus supplements, and we'll stop the presentation. And again, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box, or feel free at the end to we'll unmute ourselves and answer or pose your questions then. Also, I have some wonderful supplementary material that go along with this class. If you want to private chat me in the chat box, go to that downward caret, find the MJP Romito at ufl.edu, and just provide your email address. Or if you're more comfortable, just email me directly, and I'll be happy to send those out to you. So we know that osteoporosis is the silent thief, and sometimes it's called the silent disease, because bone loss occurs without any symptoms, and people don't even realize they have osteoporosis until they fall or have a sudden bump or sprain, and they realize that now they have a fracture. It affects the quality of our life, right? It certainly disrupts the quality of our life if we've broken a bone. It's often underreported and very much so undertreated. So currently it's estimated that we're spending about $18 billion annually, but by 2025, they're projecting that the cost of osteoporosis may rise to over $25 billion a year. And it's just, osteoporosis is more than just medical costs. Other costs are loss of income, loss of independence, either temporarily or permanently. And also it can increase the stress on individuals, their families, and their caregivers. So who is at risk? It's a major threat to our health, with more than half of the people being over the age of 50. And it's estimated that about 54 million adults in the United States have osteoporosis, or if they don't have osteoporosis, they have low bone mass, which is osteopenia. And it's not just a disease of women. 32% of those at risk are men. And we know that it can result in and lead to immobility, pain, nursing home placement, isolation, and either other health issues. And osteoporosis can strike at any age. You don't have to be 50 and older to have osteoporosis, especially if you've had a child late in life. At 40, your bones, that pregnancy, that baby sucks all the calcium and vitamin D for itself, which is what it needs to do. And in the meantime, it can lead the mother in a state of osteopenia or even osteoporosis. So don't think that you don't have to worry in your 40s about osteoporosis. It can occur at any age and in all races, and women do account for about 80% of the cases, and 20% of Asian, non-Hispanic white women, 50 and older, have osteoporosis. We said that men are not immune, but we don't really think about that, and men are often overlooked. 2 million American men currently have osteoporosis, another 12 million are at risk because it's underdiagnosed and it's underreported. So these are just estimates that 12 million could be at risk. White men appear to be at greater risk for osteoporosis, but men from all ethnic groups can develop osteoporosis. And really, it's many times men after the age of 70 do experience a more severe bone loss, and they're thinking that might have to do with testosterone and testosterone levels. Men account for 80% of the hip fractures, 80,000 hip fractures each year. And the sad thing is that men are more likely to die as a result in comparison to women from a fracture, especially a fracture such as a hip fracture. But we also have to include our youth and our children, because prevention often begins or does begin in childhood, and it continues into our young adulthood. So I know many of you on the program today, you're not children anymore, right? But think of your children that you have, or perhaps grandchildren, and there are physical risk factors that they have. A lack of physical activity. Many times schools have taken out recess, so kids aren't getting outside on that playground to run and skip and hop and so forth. And they're indoors playing on their electronics more often or watching TV instead of being physically active. Poor overall nutrition, not enough calcium in their diet. And think about the amount of milk children are drinking. Sometimes, the amount of milk now has really shifted from drinking milk or drinking alternative dairy products that have calcium and vitamin D supplemented into that beverage to drinking more soda, soft drinks, and even sugar sweetened and flavored, which are delicious, but those coffees have replaced milk drinking. And then, as our youth begins to approach young adulthood or those teenage years, they look on TV, they look in the magazines and so forth, and they start to do that frequent dieting without the care of a healthcare provider. And maybe sometimes their dieting is very restrictive, leaving out milk and dairy type of products. So what is the difference between osteoporosis and osteopenia? And maybe you've been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis. First of all, osteoporosis is derived from the Greek word osteo, meaning bone, and poros, meaning hole or passage. And as we age, our bones can become less dense. Remember, we don't have to have osteoporosis or osteopenia in our life if we have taken care of our bones through the years. But it is a deterioration of the bone. And we said that many times people don't even know they have osteoporosis until there is some type of a fracture, because it does result in fragile bones that fracture much more easily, and it is not part of the aging process. And this is just a close-up of what a normal bone looks versus one with osteoporosis. And you could see with those air spaces in between that it is easier for a bone to fracture. But say you've been diagnosed with osteopenia. And so to get an idea, we have normal bone mass. Then we go to what's called osteopenia, which is that stage in between before being diagnosed with osteoporosis. And just because you got diagnosed with osteopenia does not mean you have to go into osteoporosis. You can reverse it and go back into normal bone mass. But if you have been diagnosed with osteopenia, don't underestimate it. You are still at a higher risk for developing osteoporosis and a higher risk for fractures. So there are factors that can cause low bone mass, like heredity, less than optimal bone development during your youth due to poor nutrition, particularly low in calcium and vitamin D, abnormally accelerated bone loss because of that lack of vitamin D and calcium, and the presence of certain medical conditions or the use of medications can also affect our bone density. For example, if you have type 1 diabetes and you're taking those types of medications, those medications can affect your bone density. But we know too that hormone changes also affect our bone density. Low levels of certain hormones, for example, low estrogen in women after menopause and low testosterone in men. Thank goodness we have bones. Where would we be without our skeleton? And sometimes we take our skeleton for granted. We don't even think about it when we get up off of a chair and begin to walk around the house and so forth. But our skeleton supports our entire body, and it allows us to get around, and it provides structure that holds us together, right? Otherwise, we'd be just like an amoeba. The human body has about 206 bones, from those tiny, tiny ones in our hands and feet to those larger structural bones in our arms and legs. And our bones protect our vital organs. Look at that rib cage, how it protects your lungs as well as your heart. And think about the hips, how that protects your kidneys as well. So our bones also are a mineral storehouse. You know that when we do consume calcium, phosphorus, and vitamin D, our body stores those nutrients in our bones. And when we think about vitamin D, we need to have vitamin D in order for calcium to be absorbed into our body. So calcium will attach itself. Excuse me, we have some people coming in, and I didn't notice that. That calcium will attach itself to vitamin D, and vitamin D acts kind of like it opens the door. It kind of allows the calcium to be absorbed into the body. And that's why whenever you take a supplement, it's important to make sure that vitamin D is also part of that supplement. So our bones are constantly growing and renewing themselves throughout our lives. Our bones go through a process called modeling and remodeling. And when we're younger, bones grow in both length and density, right? Because we're getting taller. But even after bones stop growing in length, the density continues to grow, and that's called modeling. So in the remodeling process, old bones break down and they are replaced by newly grown bones at the same site. And we're always going through this process of modeling and remodeling. And over time, the bone breaks down faster than it can be replaced. And this leads to what's called the bone loss or bone density. And it also leads to lower strength over time. So it's always continuing. Your bones are a living organism right in and of itself. They got a lot going on in there that we take for granted and we don't even think about. So let's take a look at this graphic. You're going to see it in the next 3 slides. But calcium is the major building block of our bones, and that's why good nutrition is so important, especially in our young people. But calcium needs to change during our lifetime, and we need more in our youth and during pregnancy. So women after menopause and older men also need to consume more calcium to help counter the effect of age on our bone density. Women can lose up to 20% of their bone mass in the 5 to 7 years following menopause, making us more susceptible to osteoporosis. And in men, the sex hormone testosterone levels decline more slowly, and men experience bone decline around age 50. But by age 65, men and women tend to lose bone at about the same rate, and that this gradual bone loss continues throughout our entire life. That's why it's so important to continue eating a diet that has calcium and vitamin D. So we know that our bone mass peaks at about age 30, and after age 30, our bone loss slowly begins to exceed bone formation. So take a look at the graphic, and you'll see the woman standing in the center at age 30. And how straight she's standing, but also look at her shoulders and how good her posture is. And as we approach into the 40s and age 50, the woman there, she's still standing straight, but now you see a slight curvature of her shoulders. Now at age 60 and 70, you see a decline in height, and also a slight curvature on her shoulders. And it's almost like her waist is more settling in to her hips. And then by age 80 and 90, you see where our vertebrae might have experienced some fractures. We have bone loss or bone fractures that do decrease our height. So if you've gone to the doctor recently, and you might think, well, why are they always taking a look at my height? In my 20s, I was 5'5". And now in my 50s or 60s, I might be 5'4" or 5'4.5". And you've had that decrease. So they're monitoring really with that, with just measuring your height, they're also monitoring your bone density to see if there are fractures in your spine or vertebrae. But it's never too late to slow down that bone loss. So we know that our bone peaks at age 30, we just said that, but there's, things that are influenced by our bone loss, our genetic makeup, our gender, right? Males can become more have osteoporosis later in life compared to females. Our hormones, but also our lifestyles can make those make effects as well. That's why it's so critical to continue good nutrition and exercise throughout our entire life. So, although our skeleton is influenced by genetics, it can greatly be affected by other factors like our hormones, physical activity, and nutrition. So I want you to think about this question and answer it silently. But think to yourself, what are the most common fracture sites? Think about your mother or your father. Did they ever experience a fall? Or a grandparent, a great grandparent, an aunt, an uncle? And if they did, what were the bones or bone that they fractured? Well, the most common fracture sites are your hips, our spine, wrist, because think about when we fall, we're putting out our hands and we break our wrist. But 39% are other fracture sites as well. And although our hip and vertebrae fractures only account for about 42% of the fractures, they are the ones that have the greatest impact on our health and ability to maintain good health and independency. Our wrist fractures are usually the result of trying to stop our fall, but can result in significant reduction in ability to do just those regular physical activities, like preparing a meal, taking a shower, or completing a household chore. So when we do have a fracture, it does change our life. Even if we broke a finger, then it disrupts how we do those normal activities throughout the day. So hip fractures falls cause about 95% of those hip fractures and over 300,000 hospitalizations or admissions per year. Usually it tends to have a downward spiral and can be associated with isolation, feelings of being depressed because you can't go anywhere, or you can't do the normal activities you used to enjoy, or participate maybe in some social things that you used to do, especially if you were active outside playing pickleball or golf and so forth. And you could become afraid to just leave your home. So just because you have back pain doesn't mean you have osteoporosis. There are many causes of back pain, such as muscle pain and nerve problems. And a lot of times people do feel like, oh, it's my bones, I must have my osteoporosis in my back. Yes, you could, but pain from fractures due to osteoporosis are usually felt in the middle or upper portion of your back. And the pain can be either very mild or severe. It could be pain, or you might experience pain when you're sitting down and you go to stand up, or standing up, going to sit down. And fractures in the spine may result in a loss of height with severe osteoporosis. There may be fractures in the vertebrae which cause a loss of 5, sometimes even up to 8 inches in a person's height. So it can be very serious. And when we look at the older woman at the end, we know that that hump is called a Dowwager's hump, and that is due to the fact of her fractures in her vertebrae. And don't ever underestimate our jawbone, right? We don't even think about how we use our jawbone every single day to drink our coffee and to eat our food, right? But our jawbone becomes less dense, and maybe you haven't even realized it, and it's your dentist that has begun to realize it. Maybe you're seeing loose teeth, or you're having tooth loss because of your jawbone density. Or maybe you're having problems with your dentures fitting properly. They're poor chewing ability can also affect your dietary intake, and a cycle can begin of choosing less than optimal foods and a lesser variety. You might have to go to a softer diet, or you might just feel like, I just assume not eat, and therefore lose the benefit, the health benefit of eating healthy foods. So what are the risk factors? Well, we know that osteoporosis can affect anyone, both men and women, all age groups and all ethnic groups. But there are factors that are both controllable, and there are also factors that are uncontrollable. So let's take a look at some of these. So I want you to answer in your mind to see if you have any of these risk factors for poor bone health. So ask yourself, are you over the age of 65? Have you broken a bone after the age of 50? Maybe a close relative has had osteoporosis and has broken a bone. My health is considered to be fair, or is it considered to be poor? Do you smoke? I am underweight for my height. I started menopause before the age of 45. Some other factors to ask yourself. I don't feel that I've ever gotten enough calcium in my diet. I have more than 2 drinks of alcohol several times a week. I don't consider myself to be physically active. I have one or more of these medical conditions: hyperthyroidism, and you're probably taking medications for that. Of course, chronic lung disease, you might be taking steroids for that, and cancer treatments and cancer medications. But there also can be these medical conditions: hyperthyroidism, chronic lung disease, excuse me, we have somebody coming in, cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, chronic hepatic or renal disease, vitamin D deficiency, hyperparathyroidism, Cushing's disease, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis. And if you are at any risk, if you have any of these risk factors, then really you need to talk about this with your healthcare provider. And also you could seek that advice and a conversation with your doctor, of course. And also a pharmacist can also help you. Do you take one or more of these medications? Steroids, cancer treatments, thyroid meds, medicines to treat epilepsy, gonadal hormone suppression, immunosuppressive agents. If you have any of these red flags, you could be at risk for weak bone or low bone density. So you need to talk to your doctor, your pharmacist, and a healthcare professional. So what can we do for good bone health? Well, let's remember there are some factors that are uncontrollable. Our age, if we're female versus male, although remember, males do get osteoporosis, Caucasian or Asian, our family history, we're postmenopausal, perhaps we've had a hysterectomy, we're a small build. And remember back in the day, maybe when you were kids, and they would determine if you were a small build by taking your middle finger and your thumb, and you would wrap it around your wrist, and if your thumb overlapped your wrist, you were small build. If your thumb comfortably just touched your middle finger, you were medium build. And if your thumb did not touch your middle finger, you were a large build. Well, being a small build does determine you're one of your uncontrollable risk factors. And if you have a hormonal imbalance. Now let's talk about some of those controllable risk factors. Controlling the amount of calcium and vitamin D intake that we take on a daily basis. Your diet has a lot of effect on your bones, and a diet low in calcium and vitamin D makes you more prone to osteoporosis. People who have eating disorders such as anorexia nervosa or are frequently dieting to lose weight are also more susceptible. Our lifestyle affects our bone health. People who don't get the exercise or those who must spend a lot of time in bed are more likely to get osteoporosis. The type of exercise you choose also may affect your bone health. It's a good idea to choose exercises that place weight on your bones, like walking is a great exercise to do. Nicotine use or cigarettes aren't just bad for your heart and your lungs, but smoking can also lead to bone loss. So the risk of osteoporosis is yet another good reason to quit smoking. Excessive use of alcohol increases your risk as well. Excessive alcohol consumption not only leads to bone loss, but also increases the likelihood of poor nutrition and the increased risk of falling. Sex hormones affect both men and women, testosterone for men and estrogen for women. And some long-term use of medications can cause loss of bone density, and these include some anticonvulsants and steroids. And it's important to discuss your medications with your healthcare provider and pharmacist. And we'll talk more about these in Building Strong Bones. So regular physical activity, going out for that walk during the day, going for a hike, taking the stairs instead of taking the elevator, going out even for a bike ride, swimming, although swimming you are supported by the water, but swimming is great for your muscle health as well. Any type of pickleball, if you're a tennis player, many people run or jog, I should say, or run. All those that apply weight to your skeleton are great exercises to do. Yoga, Tai Chi, also great for our health. Consume a healthy diet. Most Americans need to eat more healthy foods, and foods from food groups like fruits and whole grains and our vegetable group and so forth, and diets that are lower in solid fats and added sugars and salt. Remember, half our grains should be whole grains. So following those My Plate guidelines, filling our plate and with half fruits and vegetables, but a little less of fruits and more vegetables, making half our grains whole grains. And if you are not a dairy drinker and you don't like to consume dairy for whatever reason, think about milk alternatives or dairy alternatives. Just be certain that they have added calcium and vitamin D to those products. Soy milk, almond milk, rice milk do not contain calcium or vitamin D unless they are supplemented with those. So read your labels carefully. And of course, the protein group. So here's just some ideas of, salmon, fish is a great source of vitamin, of calcium. And think about canned fish as well, especially canned canned sardines. Those canned sardines actually have the small shells crushed up in there. And those crushed bones, bones, are great for your bone health. So don't underestimate the canned version of fish. Nuts, as long as you're eating the correct portion size of nuts and not the whole container of nuts. Because many times people say, well, I started eating almonds and cashews and walnuts and I started gaining weight. Yes, you can if you overeat any food item, right? So when we think about eating a serving size of nuts, that's if you take the palm of your hand, that very small portion would be about an ounce or two of nuts, which might mean if it's walnuts or almonds, it could mean 4, 5, 6, 8 nuts and not 25 different nuts. But think about those whole greens. Think about plant proteins instead of meat in and of itself. So beans and legumes, lentils are all wonderful sources, not only of good nutrients such as calcium, but also protein. So I'm often asked, what about supplements? You know, we are bombarded with ads and seemingly endless information on TV and the internet about supplements. And how do we know what's really true? What really counts? Should we consider taking supplements and the cost of some of these supplements as well? Are they doing us good? And is there a benefit for us to be consuming them? So supplements are great to take. They're required when intake from dietary sources is just not enough to meet your needs. So many times doctors will tell us, take a calcium tablet that has calcium and vitamin D. But here's the caveat. Follow the directions on how you take your calcium tablet. The recommendation, most likely, it's 500 milligrams for each serving, because your body will not absorb more than that at each dose. So you'll want to take 2 tablets, one in the morning and then one later in the day, maybe at your dinner, maybe right before bed. But don't figure, well, I don't know if I'll remember to take that second dose, so I'm just going to take them both now. Well, you've just wasted that second dose. So you always want to break up how you take your calcium tablet, because your body will only take in about 500 milligrams. Let's remember, though, if you consider you have a poor diet and you are consuming a lot of supplements, you still have a poor diet. Now, let's take a look, for example, of this woman holding an apple. The apple, in and of itself, gives us nutrients, but it also has water attached to it, so it provides us with some hydration, and it also provides us with fiber. Well, if we take a pill for the nutrients that apple provides, it's only going to give us those nutrients. It's not going to give us any kind of hydration, and it's certainly not going to provide any fiber for us. Remember, your body recognizes food in its natural state, and it will absorb more nutrients from food better than it will from supplements. So even though a supplement might say it's 100% of the daily required amount, your body is not going to absorb 100% of that supplement, but it will absorb most of the nutrients from the natural foods we eat. Which brings us to this next slide. Supplements don't typically prevent disease, and even foods don't prevent disease, but they may reduce the risk of some diseases. And there's so much research being done on certain nutrients and eating certain foods, but they have not been able to say an absolute connection between preventing and lowering the risk. Avoid mega doses. More is not better. When we take mega doses of vitamins that are fat soluble, and vitamins are broken up into water soluble and fat soluble. So water soluble vitamins are vitamins like vitamin C that we take in, and our body takes, uses, and then gets rid of. And our body will dismiss the vitamin through our urine, through sweat, even through our mucus. So those vitamins we need to take every day, water-soluble vitamins. But fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K, our bodies will take those vitamins and hold on to them, store them for those rainy days when they need those vitamins, and then your body will call on them when they need them. So taking those mega doses of vitamins can lead to something called a hypervitaminosis. It can even lead to death over a prolonged period of time. So really read the label, look at the doses, and then make decisions as to how you will take that supplement. Be aware of misleading claims and promises. Natural does not mean it's safe. You know, in the agricultural world, they use that word natural for everything. It means nothing. There is no assigned definition to that word. And manufacturers can throw that word on any label that they want because no one has come back and said, here is the real definition, because it's so difficult to define. But think about it. Arsenic is natural, and certainly you wouldn't be consuming arsenic. So be very careful of the claims when they say natural. Read the labels on that supplement bottle, read the dosage, research potential interactions with the medications you are currently taking. And if it's difficult to research those potential interactions, go to your pharmacist. They are there to help you. They're readily available. You leave your car, go in, and you can talk to them. You don't have to make an appointment to speak to your pharmacist. Take all your medications with you, take your supplements as well, and see what they have to say and their experience and their knowledge base on how to handle supplements. You may need to time out when you take your supplements. Remember your your calcium tablet in the morning and in the evening, and medications to avoid those interactions. And of course, always talk with your healthcare provider before taking any supplements. So in summary, we talked about osteoporosis being the silent thief. We talked about the difference between osteopenia and osteoporosis, some risk factors, what we could do to prevent or treat osteoporosis, some lifestyle choices. We also talked about our diet versus supplements. So this brings us to the end of our presentation.